the January 10th meeting of the Toronto Utilities District. And Director Raymond, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, public forum. Yes. Oh, yeah. Yes, you do. Sorry. And by the way, that reminds me of saying that this morning. Since this is my first meeting, feel free to interrupt me at any time if I get out of order. So go ahead.
Okay. Director Balin. Here. Director Boatwright. Director Kearns.
Here.
Director Murphy. Director Raymond.
Here.
We'll go back to Director Murphy.
You got audio, Director Murphy? Doesn't look like she does.
It's always weird when everyone's looking at you.
Yeah.
You're in pain.
You texted her, Abby?
Yeah.
If I make a little announcement.
Sure.
So while we're waiting, just so you all know, we're on generator power. We lost power overnight. We're on generator power. We're on a brand new generator. Yesterday, when we did our startup of the generator, it was a power voltage regulator. It was bad. So we didn't anticipate having a generator today. Nevertheless, we're here with a generator. So anything can happen. A number of things could happen. Nothing. We can conduct this meeting normal. Nobody knows anything different. The generator could turn off and we will lose power. We won't have backup power. At that time, we'll have to suspend the meeting until another date, maybe tomorrow, same time, or resume the meeting tomorrow, same time. What also could happen is we could transfer back to regular utility power, in which case there will be a momentary lapse of time when we switch over and everything fires up. And I'm assuming if everything fires up just normal, we can resume the meeting. And just want everybody to know that there's a number of things that could be happening.
Thank you, Don.
So do you know which way the power comes in to TUD?
I do not.
Because right up here on Toronto Road, a little bit up, there's a tree across the power lines.
Oh, is that right?
PG&E's working on it.
Okay.
Okay, we're doing a verbal roll call. Director Murphy.
Here.
There we go. Okay. Public forum. We would like to welcome the members of the public who have taken the time to attend this meeting and provide comments on matters related to district business. Any member of the public may address the board relating to any matter within the board's jurisdiction. This need not be related to any item on the agenda. However, the board cannot act on an item unless it was noticed on the agenda. Persons speaking during the public comment will be limited to 5 minutes, or depending on the number of persons wishing to speak, it may be reduced to allow all members of the public the opportunity to address the board. No public is attending here. Corey, do we have any on the web there?
We do. Sally Rhodes does have for me to comment.
Okay, go ahead, Sally.
Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. And I just wanted to speak for a minute about the Phoenix Lake project. I'm sure you're surprised, but it was 57 days ago at the November 15th meeting that there was an agreement to have 4 projects: the Power Creek bypass, the East Pool dredge, the West Pool dredge, and a plan for the boot. I communicated with Don Perkins yesterday and understand that the grants are not completely written yet and they've not been submitted. And I so hope that can start to speed up as everybody's back from holidays. I wanted to mention 2 small issues. One was that some documents that Eric provided right after that last meeting, I really didn't have time to review until recently because I was ill. But the document explaining the relationship with Mother Lode Trust for the 4.5 acres of wetland in Phoenix Lake is particularly interesting and a possible example of what could be done with the boot. There are over 62 acres of wetland in the lake that are not necessarily part of that trust. And so the question is whether we could get the boot included in something like that. I think it might be more attractive to non-resident owners whose interest about what happens to the boot is somewhat different than the resident owners. The last thing is, with the recent storms, I am, as you are, overwhelmed with increased water that can come to us on a short time span, as was talked about in prior meetings, and the concerns of whether the capacity and the inflow area of the lake can deal with that. 12 years ago, when Horizon made their design, we weren't experiencing these kinds of whatever they call it, the atmospheric rivers. And as a result, I strongly recommend that when we get into the projects of dredging, that we take time to ask Horizon whether what we've done already is still sufficient 12 years later with this concept of atmospheric rivers, and that we build it into the design of the further dredging that's planned. So thank you for listening, and I'll be there for the meeting.
Thank you, Sally. Who's next, Corey?
That is it at the moment.
Okay. We'll go ahead and close the public comment and consent calendar, Melissa.
Okay, item number 1, minutes of the regular board meeting of December 13th, 2022. Item number 2, approval of reimbursement claims for director's statement of meetings attended and or travel expenses and claim summary for December 2022. Item number 3, consider adopting a subsequent resolution making findings in support of allowing remote meetings pursuant to AB 361.
Does any director want to pull any of the items? Director Green?
I'd like to pull claim summary.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, on page 11 is Infera Construction Management Group, and we TUD has spent over $10,000 to them, and it's for the Valley Vista project. And what I'm questioning here is, why is TUD paying that? Why is not the developer paying for that?
Certainly, the developer is paying for that. It's a pass-through. We collected $40,000 deposit from the developer, and our development agreement with them stipulates that the district can choose who to use for inspection and construction management. We did an RFP, we selected this firm, we're quite happy with them, but all of these costs are paid 100% by the developer. And we maintain or try to maintain a balance of around $20,000 so that if the last invoice comes, we aren't chasing the developer to get another payment, and we have enough to clear the books, and then we return whatever's unused back to the developer.
Okay, thank you. I was hoping I was going to hear something like that, but you know, nowhere does it say, or that I've been able to see, that you know, this has been done up front by the developer. So that's good news. That's the way it should be. On page 15 is Pace Supply Corporation, and we spent well, let's see, over $30,000 with them for several different things, and I've got a couple of concerns about that. One is quartz control valve relocate and quartz control valve relocate equipment. I hope this doesn't have anything to do with Tulalip Golf Course.
No, it doesn't. The 16-inch control valve, which currently maintains pressure on the pipeline from the current wastewater plant down through the system before it hits Quartz Reservoir, is currently located at Carly Lane as you pull off to Jacksonville Road. That valve is quite old. It's been problematic operations. And it needs to be replaced regardless of what happens with Delaley, with the new plant. It was programmed in for replacement, but when we analyzed where it would be better located, we decided to move it, so it's relocate closer to Quartz Reservoir. And so the parts that you see here include the pressure sustaining valve, the isolation valves. The vault will show up on a future claim summary if it isn't on here. It's a pretty expensive project, but it's necessary.
Okay, what is that valve, what does it supply?
What it does is if that valve wasn't there, water would flow through the pipeline from the plant and go directly into Quartz Reservoir, and there wouldn't be enough pressure for our irrigation customers in the upper zone to operate a spray field. And so it backs the water up just enough so that it maintains, say, 65 PSI in that line, and then everybody can irrigate. In the winter, it automatically opens, or we force it open, and it's a free-flowing pipe right into Quartz Reservoir.
Great. And then the other portion here is a couple of charges for meter parts for Valley Vista. I'm assuming that that's also from that holdout.
It's distinguished from the inspection account, but it is paid for by the developer out of a separate account. And those are paid at the time in which they connect each house. They have to pay a capacity fee and also the parts for the meters. And so we collect all of that at that time.
Great. Okay. And then the final thing is on page 19, State Water Resource Control Board. $68,000, 151. I don't think we're paying enough money then for annual permit fees. What in the world?
Fees are going up. I mean, it's an annual fee, and like everything else, you know, that we're facing rising costs.
Wow.
And that's just sewer. You'll see water in a couple of months, and they've gone up as well.
That's it.
I got a question on that. Do those fees for BWUC and Twain Hart, do they get passed on to those entities?
Just through our rates.
To the rates? Okay. So it's covered in the rate structure. Okay, cool, thanks. Okay, that's all you have, Director
That's
Raymond? Okay, anybody else for consent calendar? Okay, moving on. Melissa, regular business?
Hang on.
Oh, we need
I
that.
want to approve.
Yeah, yes, we do, don't we?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll move.
Director Balin has a motion to approve,
And I'll second it.
second by Director Raymond. Melissa, you want to call for the vote?
Okay. Director Bailey?
Aye.
Director Kearns?
Aye.
Director Murphy?
Aye.
Director Raymond?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 4-0.
Okay, now we'll go to regular business.
Okay, regular business, item number 4, board to discuss the resignation of Director Lisa Murphy.
Director Murphy.
Yeah, so I would just like to address the staff and the board and the community and just say thank you for the honor of having me here on the Tuolumne Utilities District Board of Directors. It's been a pleasure to serve you all. And my wife accepted a job with Cuesta College in San Luis Obispo area. And so we are moving our primary residence to San Luis Obispo. And so we'll still have a foot in the community in Sonora, but it feels most appropriate to allow space for a new board member that is fully living and engaged in the community. So I just wanted to say thank you to the ratepayers. Thank you so much to the TUD staff for everything that you do every day out there. And thank you to the other board members for this last 2 years on the board with you guys. So thank you very much, and please accept my resignation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Murphy. We appreciate your time and effort as well the last couple of years. Thank you. We do have a small business item. Your resignation was dated today. We don't have a time. So are you going to spend the rest of the meeting with us, or are you effective immediately?
Well, so the place we're renting here had a mudslide last night, so we're clearing. We crawled out the window last night to because the door was blocked with mud, and we're working on trying to clear the driveway right now. So I think I'd like to resign at this moment and get back to moving mud.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and we wish you well in your endeavors down at the Central Coast.
Thank you very much, and thank you all. And
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you.
Okay. Next item.
Okay, item number 5, cost of service analysis preliminary report.
Okay, good morning, this is President Kearns, Vice President Ringen, Director Balin. The reason we're here this morning discussing this topic is because a number of reasons, but first and foremost, probably one of the most important responsibilities I have is to keep informed of all of the business of TV. And the finances are utmost important at all times, and it's as we all know, going through our day-to-day lives, we can see the cost of everything is just going through the roof, right? And it's one thing, to look at these costs and how they impact us on a personal basis. It's a whole nother thing to see how these costs impact the $23 million budget. And so a couple of months ago, maybe in November, early November, Steve began to do some preliminary analysis to take a look at these rising costs and look forward, 5 years and just see what that's going to mean to us. Well, he's met with the managers on several occasions to show just what he's come up with, and we felt it's extremely important for us to get this information to you as soon as possible. Again, my job is to keep you informed, give you all the best available information in plenty of enough time for us to make any sort of decisions or movement with sufficient time to be solid. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve and let him do his thing. He only has a few slides. So I'll let him do his what he's got to do. As you can see, this first slide here, just kind of the top areas where we see massive increases in costs. Chemicals, electricity, fuel, some of that stuff you see at your own home. But we have some particular things like chemicals and cybersecurity, in addition to the normal costs. And really, this is the end of all our needs. We have all kinds of needs, right? And so, in coining this phrase, it's really just the tip of the iceberg, right? So, for a long time, better than a year for sure, I know you've heard from me saying that aside from the PG&E acquisition, right, this district has many, many, many needs that far exceed what our ratepayers can pay. So and that was long before, at least before I was aware of the impacts to inflation and the cost of services. So all this is snowballed into where we are here today, and it's just important to know, as soon as we can get this information. Like I said, Steve has a little bit of information to provide for you, and we'll have a discussion at the end. Okay, so I'll take it away, Steve.
All right, thank you, Don. Good morning, board members, Mr. President, Sally watching here. As Don led to it, each time we present a financial summary or we work on the budget, are we staying within our budget? Are we doing those things? But, several board members have asked on occasion, what are we seeing as far as rising costs? And, that list that we just showed is just a sampling. Those are critical costs to the district. We can't operate water and sewer without electricity. We can't operate it without fuel. We can't operate it without chemicals. And all of those have seen extraordinary increases. Since last time we did the budget, we've seen huge increases. And the last time we looked at this. So at that point, we became concerned and we wanted to say, well, what if this continues? What does that mean? Where are we going? And again, you've heard me say it before, our world's filled with uncertainty. First it was COVID, then it was inflation, some of these other ones. And that uncertainty certainly continues to exist. And that's hard for me as an old school CPA. I want it black and white. I want to know what the cost of living is going to be. I want to know, what everything's going to do. So we took it upon ourselves to do this. Today is merely to provide information. We're not asking for any decisions. Ideally, there will be a consensus at the end of it. But really a discussion as to what we've been discussing and what we see and what our main concerns are. So we've tried to break it up into 4 main categories. The background, just very brief, summary of the issues, staff analysis and evaluation, and finally board discussion and guidance. So as some background to this right now, let me move this. So as a background here, November 2015 was when the board adopted the rate study, which is in effect for fiscal year 16 through fiscal year 20. We had 5 consecutive rate increases, with the last rate increase being January 1st, 2020. This past June, the board approved the fiscal year 23 operating and maintenance budget, as well as the CIP budget for this year. The analysis we're providing today was based on the actual results, revenues, and expenses for last year that were audited, and then the budget for this year so far. So what goes into cost of services? When we throw that term out there, really what we're looking at for our operation, water and sewer, has to deal with first and foremost annual operating and maintenance costs. I mean, that's the most critical thing, the day-to-day. What do we absolutely have to have for our primary purpose? As we all know, we have aging infrastructure. We have a tremendous amount of infrastructure. We've made tremendous progress. But as inflation affects O&M, it also affects CIP and the infrastructure. We have debt service obligations. We've tried real hard over the past 15, 20 years to not incur additional debt, to get caught up with it, but obviously regional was an opportunity where we need to get the grant funds, we need to incur debt. And most likely going forward, the bigger projects are going to require debt as well. And finally, there's reserves. We have a reserve policy. We need to continue to develop that and utilize that for all these as well. So in these assumptions, Corey, can you mute them? Thank you. As far as cost of services in here, we have to make some assumptions. As I said before, it's really uncertain where we're at, but these are kind of the critical assumptions in this analysis that we're showing you today. First and foremost is consumption. We've moved a long way. Go back 20 years ago, everything was based on usage. Even the state was saying all your fees should be based on usage. Well, our operation is fixed cost. And so we've moved away from that. The majority of our revenue is related to fixed basis and a base charge, but consumption does pay into play, especially for the bigger users. So for the purposes of this analysis, we look back at fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23. They've stayed very consistent. Since the last time we had the drought, people really haven't recovered. Our usage has been very similar, so that's the assumption we make first and foremost. The next huge one we've been talking about is inflation. What is inflation going to be over the next 5 years? Every expert I asked said, who knows? We're in uncharted times. We don't know. If we go back to last April, I believe it was 8%. It was running at that time. 6% is kind of where we went originally, looking at this year. But the federal government and even the state are implementing things that should change that. Historically, inflation, when it has gotten very high, things have been enacted to make that inflation calm down. So for purposes of this analysis, we kind of were consistent with what we did with the budget, what we did with some of the other things we've been talking about. And we start at 6% for the first year, and we decrease to 2% over the 5-year periods. I think we go 6, 4.5, 3, 2, and 2. Is that a valid assumption? I think it's the best we have right now, and I think it's conservative or in the middle, because you don't want to understate it too far or overstate it. The other factor that comes into here for us and our community, it's not a huge number, but you have to look at growth. If I look back over the past 5 years, we've had 0.25%. That's still something in terms of our revenues. So I did utilize that, we plugged that in. You know, our true growth in the urban water plan and some of the other documents with the county are these other private water agencies. And if we were mandated to take over this one or that one, I mean, I think there's still over 100 within our county, that would really impact our growth. But for right now, we haven't had an acquisition, we haven't been mandated yet, but they continue to talk about it. So for purposes of this, that's what we did. The next huge one that comes into play here is the CIP. We recently adopted a 5-year plan for CIP. So that was our starting point. What do we do? You know, you saw what the bid came back for regional. Is that going to happen with, say, Sierra Pines? Is that going to happen with some of these other larger jobs? We really don't know, but you'll see in a minute. What we did with CIP, we essentially took the 5-year plan and plugged that in. As to reserves, we do have a reserve policy, so we're assuming we're going to do everything we can to meet that policy and maintain those reserves. And finally, the debt coverage. Right now, we have what's called loan covenants that requires us to maintain a certain balance as well as to repay these. That came into play with the federal government, for regional, and some of the other ones. So that's another critical key assumption we have in here. So that long-winded lead up leads us to what we're calling a 5-year projection. We're starting with fiscal year 24 next year, and we're going through the 5 years on here. Again, the farther you go out, the more challenging and difficult it is. But our approach to this was just like we do with the actual financial statements in the budget, is our expenses are broken down into approximately 50 categories. Everything from electricity, fuel, to lawyer, attorney's fees, insurance, everything in there. And we analyzed every one of those expenses. We met with the managers, we met with the superintendents, we contacted the insurance agency. For labor, we actually went through it on an employee by employee basis like we do for the budget, plug that in, trying to anticipate it. But to me, the most critical one, the most accurate is going to be the next year or two. As I've always told you, we're going to watch it like a hawk, and we're going to go forward in here. But I think the 5-year projection is really important. It's one thing to meet our budget this year. It's another thing to say, well, where are we going to be in fiscal year 28? And none of these projections include any cost related to PG&E. Until they come back to the table, until we know more for it, until that, it was just too much guesswork. And I think it just skews the numbers too far. So with that said, I have 2 separate tables. There's a lot of data, I'll forewarn you on there, but just to give you kind of the big picture, if you will. The first one is strictly for water, and the second one is for sewer. And I realize it's a little bit hard to see up there, but essentially the top half is revenue breaking down into the main categories, meaning service charges or water sales, property tax. Then we go into some of the miscellaneous ones, debt service, recovery, which are surcharges, investment income, and miscellaneous, to give a total revenue. And then the columns going across, and that gray shows up a little weird on the TV here, but it's basically saying projected fiscal year 2024 through 2028. Then we included a total revenue, which starts out at 17.5 and ends up at 17.6. Again, this assumes we haven't done anything. No changes, we don't have any additional rate increases. We're not including any grant revenue or anything of those, just like we do our budget, essentially. For expenses below that, we break down the critical, the 2 main categories over them is obviously labor and then services and supplies. And again, like I said before, those were analyzed on a line-by-line item and really know what's going on there. Water debt service, that's interest and principal we're going to pay on there. And then that next line there, if you see this CIP down here, so if you look across there, it's 6.5 every year. Well, how can that be? What's going on? Well, if you look at our 5-year plan, certain years go up and down depending on the particular project. Well, for purposes of this, we took the total and then just averaged it out there, because say 2024 was gonna be over 7 million, and then 2025 was gonna be 5.5 million. You know, we wouldn't say, well, we're gonna reduce revenue the second year, increase it the third year, or whatever. So we just took it across the board for purposes of this projection. So then what's the bottom line? What are we looking at here? Why are we concerned? Based on all this for fiscal year 24, if everything goes according to it, we do all the CIP, we do everything else, we're gonna end up with a revenue shortage of about $4.5 million. Going forward after that, it goes to 5, 5.5, 5.8, and then up to 6.2. Now, it's not cumulative on top of each other, it's just, you know, looking 1 year at a time. So if nothing's done that first year, 4.5. If nothing's done 2025, it'd be 5 on there. So, you know, that's kind of what the result is if we do nothing at this point. And before any comments or anything else where we go, I just have a couple more slides and then we can talk more. But we essentially did the same thing for sewer. You know, everything we do is we have 2 enterprise funds, water and sewer. That's our primary purpose. That's our mission. That's where everything goes on here, and those costs are any admin costs are allocated between the two. So sewer, it's a similar situation, just smaller dollar amounts. The revenue on the top, 7 million, essentially across the board. Expenses, 8.5 million. Now they do jump up because we begin to repay. If you look at the debt service, we begin to repay the loan we have from USDA and some of those other ones on there. CIP, same thing, 1.8 million across the board. We took the total CIP. It results in a revenue requirement of 1.2 million the first year, going up to 2.6. So, you know, over those 5 years, quite a shortage. But again, I think the biggest concern is really 2024 and 2025, because that's more immediate. Once we get out there to 26, 27, 28, we'll know a lot more after we get through the first year. Now, this next slide doesn't tie directly into that, but I think it's important for the board's understanding when we're talking about how does this affect our customers? What does it mean? Our customers are made up into really 3 classes. One is those that have water only, those that have sewer only, and those that have both. So we have a total of approximately 14,000 customers. Water only is 8,000, sewer only is 650, both water and sewer is 5,504. So that's just kind of a place marker for the board if we were starting to talk about how much revenue do we need. Our last rate increase, you know, there was both water and sewer, but you know, that's kind of the result of that, but I think that's important to put that in perspective. So what does it all mean? I just showed you this, and why are we talking about this? Is that, you know, essentially if you look at the numbers and what we're saying in there, and with the current inflation, with the current outlook, the conclusion is that rate increases are necessary. You know, we haven't had a rate increase since 2020. We have not calculated what they might be here. I'm not presenting that. We're not presenting that to the board. But clearly, when we look at this, they're necessary to meet our necessary operating costs. We need sufficient and reasonable operating reserves. We're required to maintain adequate debt service coverage ratios. And clearly, we have CIP needs that can only be funded through rate increases. We try as hard as we like.
TUD Board.
Grants and everything else, but
TUD Board.
I just needed it.
I muted him. Oh, thank you. So, you know, that's kind of where we stand right now. Ideally, we're asking the board for some kind of a discussion. We know this is information provided, and the first time we've addressed it in this kind of summary here. But, you know, the board has to have its input. We want your input. And then the kind of the logical next step would be to, where do we go from here? And typically that would mean to go ahead and look at a rate study plan where we would take these numbers and convert them to what are the options? What would this might look like as far as an increase, and do that? And then bring that back to the board at a future date. And we'd have a workshop, I imagine, to go over what those numbers kind of look like and such. But I think we've really put a due diligence effort into this. I don't think these numbers are any way inflated. I think they are reasonable. Part of my concern is that what if our inflation is another 8% instead of 4%? But you can equally say, what if, we planned on 6 and it's really 4? And that's something we just have to watch out here. So have I said enough time? I mean, board members, please, I'm open to any and all questions. I mean, it's just, this is where we're at today with the greatest minds of TUD and everybody we reached out to.
Ron, Director Reno.
So, Steve, would you mind going back to that chart that had the water? Yeah. So, I'm trying to remember now. We're going to be short how much on 2024?
So if you look at the first year, this column, I don't know, that laser is kind of weird for me, but this is 2024. So the bottom line revenue requirement would be $4.5 million.
That's how much we would be short. Okay.
If everything's accomplished, much like the budget, this has built into it that full CIP.
Yeah, well, and that was where I was going next, and that was to Dawn, and that is, you got the same figure for CIP all the way across. Will that be adequate for our necessary needs?
So let me just say, the reason it's the same number straight across is because they go up and down each year, right? And it just makes the study just crazy, so we just average it just for illustration purposes. Yes, on two hands, right? On one hand, yes, that's enough to do what we can do, right? We only have so much staff here. If we were to somehow, I'm not suggesting have more staff, we could accomplish more projects. But we really, logistically, we only have so much staff. So this is completing the same amount of types of projects we've always completed, but now with the added inflation of cost of services. So yes.
I'm just wondering if we have, I know we've got a lot of projects that need to be done. That goes without saying, but there's some that are semi-critical, let's call it that. And that's what kind of concerns me here is that TUD has accomplished a heck of a lot in the past few years, especially the past couple of years. And some real problem areas have been taken care of. And we're not going to have troubles with those areas now for a long time. And so that is very helpful. But what concerns me is if we have any, hand grenades with a pin out, and we can't get to it.
Well, it's really important. What we have in our favor is very seasoned staff, right? Most of us have grown up here in this district, and we understand the critical parts, even the underground critical parts. We understand, but we need to continue to analyze what is most critical to this district, what is most critical to our customers and the public, that just happens to be in and around our infrastructure. This isn't a time to talk about CIP, but I just can't help myself but just to let you know, right? Currently, we have 66 tanks. We're down from 80 something. We're at 66 tanks and our storage is good. Of those 66 tanks, a third of those are in, not the greatest condition. We need to address those, right? And of those, right, some are more critical than others. So that's why staff has to continuously reassess the situation, the nature of our infrastructure, the condition of our infrastructure, and reprioritize. That's why, looking out at years 26, 27, 28, okay, well, that's the best minds we have today. But when we get there and we really see that this thing or that thing is in worse shape than we thought it was, we'll have to adjust. But yeah, we have to be vigilant and pay attention to our infrastructure.
So then, for Steve, I used to know the figure, but I don't anymore. What is, for every dollar that we increase the rates by, what does that mean for total amount of money for the budget?
Yeah, directly to that, and then I want to come back to what you said because I think it's important. Right now, it's approximately 7 million, a little bit less than that. But $1 that would go across the rates would bring in approximately 6.67 million.
I think it was $7.
Yeah.
That was $1.
Yeah, $7, excuse me.
$7.
$7 gets you $1 million.
8 million?
1 million. A $7 increase, 1 million. Now, what I was gonna tag on, Director Ring, because I think it's really important, the point you bring up about CIP and that, because, this inflation directly impacts CIP. The projects cost so much more. When I first got here, I told Don, let's do a tank a year and all that. Well, we didn't plan on a tank failure. And so then we had to do that one. On the same token, here's the two extremes. On the other hand, we're comfortable adopting a budget that's $2 million short because we feel we're gonna get some grant money. We're gonna have some delays in projects. We're gonna have permitting or whatever. And so, there's a happy medium in there. But when that 2 becomes 4.5, you get a little more concerned. And the bigger thing is that we're gonna have a CIP update next month, I imagine, with the financials. But Don alluded to the fact that when you all adopted that 5-year CIP, there's a whole bunch of projects that weren't on there. It's kind of that bottom of the iceberg, and you're right. Some projects have a higher priority than others. Some projects have more of an opportunity for grant funding and doing that. So on one hand, you have this, is it enough? On the other hand, is it gonna be too much? I don't think so on there. So, it's important and it's challenging because again, as soon as we put that 6.5 in there, is that still a valid number in 2028? And what are the critical priorities? Now, historically, what we've done is if we were to cut costs, how do we cut costs? Like I said before, we can't cut electricity, maybe a little bit, but we can't really cut gas. We have to do that. We need chemicals to run it. So historically, we've held off on CIP. And, we had those dark years where we had 0 CIP for water, and I feel we're still paying for that. If we don't do CIP that we should be doing right now, we're gonna pay more in the long run and more down the road. And what is catastrophic failure or imminent failure, versus some of this other thing? If we had a grant, we could go ahead and do this, that, or the other, but, what are the critical components? But yes, back to your question there, the calculation is about, I think it's $6.6 per month per customer would get us $1 million.
Can't stand anymore.
Director Bell? You asked all the questions I was going to ask, so that's good. So we'll go ahead and open this up to the public. I'm sure there's somebody else.
Correct, we do have Sally Rhodes with her hand up and also the person calling in. So we'll go with the person calling in first, and then we can go to Sally Rhodes.
Am I on?
You'll be next, Sally.
Okay. My question, I realize, I realized,
Just a moment, Sally, we have somebody else ahead of you that had called in.
oh, I'm sorry, the audio is not that great. Thank you.
Hi, TUD Board. This is Michael Allen. I was the one who called in early. I'm a retired CPA, retired law. I practice law. As a flyer in the military, I'm very, very well educated. One of the things that concerns me as the population is aging, I am retired. I am a conservative, a huge conservative. My water consumption is about 6% of what is allotted to me, because I know California has water issues. But I'm paying the same amount as a person who does not conserve. One of my neighbors, they have 3 cars. They're out there every week washing their cars. I am very conservative. I do military showers. I go in the shower, I soap down, I wet myself down, soap, shave, rinse off. My shower water is on for less than 2.5 minutes. The point I'm making is that I think we need to give those who conserve benefit in water, in the water billing, and to charge people who use more water. So rather than having a flat scale monthly, is to have a sliding scale. For those who save water, they get a break. For those who use a lot of water, they're going to pay more. And this is an incentive. And I think what the board will find when this happens, everybody's going to want to cut down. Right now, there's no incentive to cut down. None. Zero. Again, being a CPA, I know this. I mean, when we go to the grocery store, we buy things individually. If we buy more, we pay more. We put gas in our car. We pay more per gallon. But with the TUD billing, it's everybody pays the same flat amount. That's not fair. It's not wise business. Do you understand the point I'm making?
Steve, you want to take that?
I mean, just to respond, what you're talking about, something that would be considered as part of the rate study plan, and we can take a look at it. It's a lot more complicated than what you do, and we appreciate your input, and thank you very much.
Yeah, we appreciate your
Well, I cannot hear you. The microphone is echoing so much.
That's on this side.
Yeah, thank you for your comment, Mr. Allen. Any other comments?
Is that it?
Are you done, sir?
Do you need a new board member? I'd be willing to be on the board.
Well, there'll be
I'm a
more on
retired
that
CPA.
in the coming weeks.
I'm sorry?
There'll be more on that in the coming weeks.
There'll be more on that in the coming weeks?
Correct.
Okay. And how can I give you my email address so I can be informed?
How about if you call the front office and you can leave it there and we'll take it from there.
Okay, because I really do. I want to help. I think my ideas are very sound, that the more people use water, they should pay more. The people who conserve pay less. I mean, that's just good civic thinking.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Mr. Allen. Sally's next. Corey?
Thank you. That comment was extremely valuable because I think there's an evolving idea of how all of this should be funded in the kind of situation many of us are in at this point. But I want to also question with the enormous responsibility for maintaining water infrastructure, isn't there a need to increase your tax allowance from property taxes?
So, Sally, you know, our property taxes are completely controlled by the county of Tuolumne. Ever since Prop 13, special districts like ourselves, there was an established allocation at that time. So our property taxes are limited to their calculation and essentially to a 1% increase each year. So the amounts we're including there are that. We do have the authority to basically establish and assess a tax, but as you've seen through the paper, that would mean it'd have to go to a popular vote, and you have to have a 2/3 majority if we were to implement a specific kind of tax assessment for these needs. We're what's considered an enterprise district, and by law, we are to charge service fees for providing water and sewer in order to cover our operating and maintenance costs, reserves, debt service, as well as CIP. So essentially, we're required, and that's where a rate study comes in, to establish our expenses, establish allowable methods to allocate that to classes of customers, and then assess a service charge. We right now, our current system is both fixed or based as well as volumetric. But as far as your idea that we could raise property taxes to cover our capital costs, that's not a viable option for us at this time.
Well, I wasn't asking you to raise property taxes. I was more interested in finding out why Tuolumne County doesn't afford you more.
The amount we get from Tuolumne County, like I said, is limited and controlled by Prop 13. And that's an established allocation that has not changed since that time.
Disappointing, yeah.
Reality for us, but thank you for the suggestion.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Director Bailey?
Yeah, so along those same lines, I've always wondered why we get property taxes of about whatever that is, $1 million, almost $1 million.
Correct.
Okay, it's been that way forever, and CCWD gets $3 million. Can you explain why they get $3 million?
It's a very complicated one, but to me, the easiest way to understand it is if you go to Murphy's and you look at the new development, every time they have a new shop, every time they have a new winery, Angels Camp has, the golf course was established there. It really relates to the development of the particular area. So for ours, other than the casino coming in, which again wasn't really a taxable event because they're tribal, the development in our community, that's what dictates. And so our property taxes essentially have stayed flat or gone up a little bit based on residential house values. Whereas Calaveras has significant, if you look at Valley Springs, you look at Murphy's, Arnold, Angels Camp, all those corridors, they've had such tremendous development that, when I first started here, CCWD was getting more property tax than they were from service revenue. And they could supplement that. We are including our property tax revenue in the calculation of our rates. So some agencies are able to treat it as supplemental and spend that money elsewhere as discretionary funds. But to me, that's the explanation for the real difference between us and Calaveras. That makes sense.
Thank you, Director Miller. Any other public comment? Steve, did you have something else?
Yeah, just to finish it off, the last slide I had here is really, the way I envision this, or the way the managers and TV envisions this, is to get it to the board and give the board the opportunity to provide feedback, ask questions. I think really we're looking for a consensus for the board to tell the staff to go ahead and proceed with what I say is preparing a written plan. What it really means is we take this information, we take these projections, and then we go back to more of a rate study. What would it look like for an individual customer for water? What would it look like for an individual customer for sewer? What do we want to bring in? Do we bring in all the capital, part of the capital and everything else, and then schedule a workshop? I'd like to have, at least for my staff and the management, have a month, if the board's agreeable to that. Basically, next month, a month from now, we would come back, schedule, I say a workshop, but it'd probably be a board agenda item, and come back to you with a written report, show you examples of what that might mean on a per month basis, per customer, how the methodology might work. At that time, the board can take a look at it. It's not anything that you would adopt or anything else. It's more a shifts from a cost of services study to a rate study, and provide the board some recommendations as to what the increases might look like. And again, that's what I guess we're asking for the board to come back. There wouldn't be any action at that time other than what it looks like and how best to proceed. And I don't know if you want to mention cost.
Yeah, so, I guess there's a couple of ways we can do this. We could farm this out, this effort, farm it out to somebody such as Raptels or others, or we can do it in-house. And for me, I really trust Steve and his team to do this in-house. It'll save us, many thousands of dollars. So my recommendation is for me to ask Steve and his team to proceed with this rate study.
I want to go back to the public comment for a minute. We didn't close that out. Corey, was there anybody else that wanted to start?
No, at the moment, no.
Okay, all right, we'll go ahead and close the public comment. I got just one question, Steve. You mentioned it, and Mr. Allen mentioned it in his comments too, about the volumetric side. There is a volumetric side of our rates.
Yeah.
And heavy water users do pay more than conservative water users. So there is that factor. I just want to make that point that whoever's listening knows that that's.
We include the 400 cubic feet as part of your base charge. You're entitled to that. That was designed to be a livable amount. He consistently has contacted customer service, Melissa, myself, come to the board before and everything else. His argument is he never uses the 400, so he thinks he should pay less. The real challenge is, I understand, this idea that we need to conserve, and that, how do you get people to conserve? You charge them more. That's flat out. But there's a livable amount, and this 400 cubic feet is a livable amount. And for us, like I said earlier, our charges are fixed. So if all of a sudden, if you use less, you're going to pay less, then we don't have enough money. There's a certain amount that we need, and that's how our rates and that's how our water rules are designed right now, to have 400 fixed amount, and then the big users use more.
Yeah,
that's
the age-old story. Director Regan, you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just gonna tag on to what Steve was saying, is that that's the one thing that most people don't understand. I don't use hardly any water either, but I don't gripe about the bill I get, because I know that it costs so much to run the operation in the beginning. So to shave it down just because a few people use less is only going to hurt operations. And then going back to what Don mentioned, I think you're making the right decision to have Steve and his crew do it rather than somebody like Raptels, not only for the savings of money, but because they are familiar with the operation. There won't be any learning curve.
exactly. And just to tag on to that, because that's an important point, back to what you were saying about people using less water and everything, it's kind of this, in our community, an at-will concept. We have a lot of people who are vacation homeowners and that sort of thing, and their water needs to turn on when they get here. And, it's not like, we're not like San Diego or somebody else where we buy water and sell it to you. We provide the same water every day in here and that. So if we have a vacation homeowners who's not here, we need the income to have ditch tenders there and to have people servicing them and doing that. We have these costs all across the board. Now, back to what you said as far as the consultants, it's a lot. I feel a significant responsibility and burden here. I worry about this on a daily basis. I want what's fair and best for the district and our ratepayers. However, you know, when we did the PG&E Prop 218, we released it, we told everybody about it, that was a totally different animal. We're telling people how important this is, 100 years, and I mean, it had so many different things. This is about our basic operations. This is us providing service on a day-to-day basis. So consequently, I don't think we're reinventing the wheel. We have a system right now that's an established methodology. It has not been challenged, it's here. So really what we're doing about it is we need additional revenue. And if you look at our system the way it is, we're not talking about changing the amount people are receiving. We're not talking about changing who gets allocated more or less or different classes of customers. If we needed that and that was appropriate today, I think I would recommend we have an outside consultant, and it would cost us, I mean, down, say thousands of dollars, it's probably hundreds of thousands of dollars. You know, and that's, it's only 1,000, to me, it's hundreds of thousands. But again, for purposes of this, I think my staff, myself, and with the help of the management team and the board, that we can come up with some recommendations and a solution. And, you know, we've been able to meet our budgets for several years now. And we've made real improvement to the infrastructure, to the financial condition of the district. And it's very important to me to continue that. I don't want to go backwards, even in this challenge of inflation and everything else. You know, that's where my focus has been. I want to continue to do it. So I can assure the board I will give it my best effort. And, you know, when we come back, hopefully a month from now, we'll have something to put in terms of hard dollars, what it might look like, and then we can see how best to go there.
Thank you, Steve. Any other comment?
Maybe I'll just say something. Some of the thinking about efficiency and water conservation, and Steve, I appreciate your comments in terms of that it is complicated. You know, we have an integrated system, and so the question would be, oh, if we all save, and yeah, this water, who benefits from water conservation? Who gets that water? Whose water is it? Where is it stored? Is it our facility? What is the benefit of conservation? Okay, I'm not talking efficiency because we all benefit when we tighten up the system. That's efficiency. We fix the leaks in the pipes. But I can see with this gentleman, the caller, is where he is saying it makes sense to conserve is in a highly urbanized, tightly packed, economy of scale environment where it's either going in the ocean or you're saving it. And you know exactly where you're saving it, and you know that you can draw it down next year. Okay, that's the way that's here. But for us, I think if we have this workshop, the larger picture, not just that piece of being really responsible for and not going backwards, totally agree with that. But the larger picture is that we are integrated into the watershed. And I feel that anything we save, we don't necessarily benefit. We don't have the, you know, where it's stored, downstream benefits. So I think that we need to say that. When I look at insurance, fire insurance, I look at people dehydrating their landscape, thinking that they're gonna save water. Well, whose water? Where? You're not, I have, help me here. What? Am I seeing something that's really not a reality? I mean, I see us absolutely conserving water, saving water, taking short showers, etc. But we've got to factor in the whole watershed and what our needs are. So I'll just say it at that. It's really complicated. I appreciate what that gentleman is saying. But at the same time, I think we need to actually have a discussion of the trajectory that we're going, because we can raise rates and our population is flat. I really want a larger discussion of how integrated we are and how much our whole environment, including our property values, depend on some sort of hydrated landscape. So that's all. I can't excise out water as a commodity when we've got the whole thing to really worry about.
Good points, Director Bennett. Director Rainey.
I want to tag on to what Director Bailey was saying, because I totally agree with what, excuse me, with what she's saying. But I want to give you an example, and that was in 2014, TUD instituted a 50% cutback on water usage, with 30% being absolute, otherwise you get fined. And so the whole county came together, or all our ratepayers came together and really did the job. They really saved. And the water was held up in Pinecrest. And our reward for having done that, round out our county and everything else, was PG&E let it all out down in Philadelphia, made electricity with it. So, you know, conserving to a certain extent makes sense, but until we have a way that we have control of the water, it doesn't make any sense. That's my 2 cents.
I would add on too that we not only have a hold of those water rights, but a place to store it and a way to benefit from that conservation.
Right.
Because right now, you're right, it's tough to point at something and say, yeah, this is a benefit to the customers of TDD that we are conserving. And that's the point that I believe both of you are making. And we're like a lot of these watershed communities up and down the Sierras, and we're in that situation. So, okay, anything else on this subject? Sounds like we're in consensus to go ahead and allow Steve's crew and staff to see what they come up with here in a month or so, and we'll move forward. You don't need a motion on this, correct? It's just you just need a
No motion, exactly what we're looking for is just that. The three of you, would you know, be open, approved, if we can get it done, good job, thorough and everything else, to bring it back to you in a month for purposes of discussion as far as a written rate plan.
You can have it.
I do have a clarification because to your staff report says workshop. And it's also a board meeting, so are we going to do an agenda? So when I put it in the minutes, are we doing just an agenda item on February 14th, or are we gonna actually schedule a workshop? Since the staff report says that, I haven't said.
I use the term workshop more if the board said, hey, you know, this is a really big deal, we need a second meeting or anything else. I don't see an issue with having it on the board agenda to start with. If Dawn and Melissa and the board's accepted with that, or would you prefer to have a separate meeting altogether just for that?
Director Bailey?
So here it says a board workshop for February 14th. Okay, so that's kind of what I'm assuming that we're consenting to. I'm fine with that. That's the recommendation. And that would give, like you said, Steve, of a month. But I have a difficult time looking at this trajectory of continually buying chemicals, continually treating the water, flatline population, and yet we're not looking at how to work with an integrated watershed system and the county to help us with our water quality. I see that as a huge savings for the ratepayer if we can actually talk about this other big component of we're all in this together and clean it up and clean everything up and clean everything that's coming down into Phoenix, because that helps our ratepayers. So yeah, we can raise rates, jack them up, but we at some point need to do everything we can possibly to work with the county to improve our water quality and our water quantity for the ratepayer. In addition to, help us with our water quality. We can keep treating it and raise rates and buy the chemicals, but it just doesn't make sense to have this conversation as a sustainable solution and still have the county doing whatever they want, which affects our ratepayer pocketbook. So it's hard just to have, I want this discussion, Steve, don't get me wrong. We have to have this, but at some point we need to, it's not sustainable in my book. We have to help transition to a countywide approach at valuing this water and helping it on its journey to the tap. Because that's part of cleaning it and keeping it good. It's in Phoenix. It needs to be valued there. So I just at some point, someday, want that conversation to help us with the water quality.
I think, Director Bailiff, would you like me to try to facilitate, and when I say try, I mean that word try. Would you like me to attempt to facilitate a board-to-board meeting, county board of supervisors and TUD board, we can have this conversation?
Sure, and I also think it gets into separate from the February 14th, which I'm expecting that that's what we're consenting on, unless we rearrange it. But to another larger discussion with continually partnering and really working with nature, that's where all the money is, to clean and restore our ecosystem as we encroach on it. So yes, but also I see direction. I see a workshop where we are giving clear direction that this is not just my priority, but eventually a board priority, if it is.
Director Regan, you had a comment?
Yeah, this would be the perfect timing for that sort of activity, because at the last Colony County Natural Resource Committee meeting, water kept coming up time after time during that meeting. And I've never seen the county be so involved in talking about water and so on. I don't know what they've got going on, but if they're that interested, let's get them real interested.
Water quality should be, sorry, speaking out of turn, should be all because of fire, if nothing else.
Okay, so bringing it back here to the agenda item. So we're gonna go ahead then, and you'll have a spot on the agenda for February 14th regular board meeting. We won't do a workshop as it's scheduled right now. And Jan, you're gonna work with the county to set up some sort of meeting that we can address the issues that Director Bailey and Director Regan brought up. That sound like a good explanation of what we just talked about?
Clarification,
Sure.
President Kearns, we're not gonna have a workshop on the 14th, what do we have?
Well, it's gonna be a part of the agenda, correct?
Blame me, it's semantics. I called it a workshop. We want to bring you a report at that date. I'm assuming it's during the board meeting. To me, if we wanted to have a separate workshop, we could, or whatever else, but for right now, I think it's just an agenda item.
Okay, so, so you're asking for a regular agenda item to bring what you come up with your
A rate
staff.
study
And then-
plan to this.
Correct, and at that point, you would or would not be looking for a motion to approve that plan?
The process would be with the rate study would be for the board to approve initiating a Prop 218 process.
Okay.
That's how the sequence of events, it goes over a period of time. That's what we had to do with the PG&E, that's what we did back in 2015. So we would bring the report, the board could say, we want something different, or the board could say, we approve with proceeding with the Prop 218 process, and then that has required steps.
Okay. Any idea at this early date on what other items might be on our agenda that day? Because we don't wanna have an 8-hour marathon meeting here, so if we need to break it up, now's the time to speak up. What's our normal items that we have on the second day?
Claim summary.
The claim summary is normal, so
Okay.
pretty much what you see here. Everything on the consent calendar is probably gonna be on that.
Okay, but my point is there's nothing that normally pops up on the second meeting of the month that might bite us for time.
First meeting.
There's just
Oh,
one
excuse me,
item.
yeah, first meeting.
Dawn and I haven't spoken about it, but it would be a closed session for the board to consider purchase of land acquisition. I don't know that it needs to be a long item. It's a pretty good deal. I think the board will see that quickly, but it is another thing that would consume part of your attention on that day. So it's up to you if you want to separate them out.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna leave it up to you guys, because you guys are gonna be the ones bringing this. So if you want a separate time to take this on, now's your chance. How long do you think it's gonna take, Steve? And me,
A
don't be.
lot of that's dependent upon the board. I think, normally what we're looking at here, like I said earlier, is not to change the methodology. I mean, we basically, like I said, we have a system in place where we're billing customers. It's been accepted. I believe it's fair. And really, we're looking at modifying those amounts. And so the real discussion would be how much and when, those are kind of things. If we were looking at changing some other things or whatever, then I think we need a consultant. I think we need multiple meetings to do that. So I think this can be pretty straightforward, and if not, we can deviate and schedule a special meeting.
I guess you could make a comment in staff reports at our next meeting at the end of January.
Right.
Where you see if it's starting to get unruly and you want to ask for a workshop at that time, you could. So, does that sound agreeable to everybody? Yes. You guys okay with it? Okay. I'm done with questions on that. Everybody else?
And I want to say thank you to the board. I mean, I wouldn't bring it to you if it wasn't critical importance. And I'm not one, I think I've proven I'm not one just to raise rates on a whim. We haven't raised rates for 3 years. Nobody saw COVID coming. Nobody saw inflation coming. But it's necessary to have this discussion. Thank you for your support.
Director Regan?
Just a comment to go in along with that. As you know, Steve, when you first came to work here, the finances were a mess. And rate increases in the previous years had been taken off, back down. And it put TUD in that heck of a bind. So we don't want to fall back into that trap.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on. Item 6, Melissa?
Okay, item number 6, consider approving a resolution adopting the district credit card policy.
Steve, I believe this is you again.
This is me again. Hopefully this one is a lot more straightforward than everything else. Kind of to summarize, the district's current credit card policy dates back to 2007. President Barbara Balin approved it at that time. When the policy was done at that time, it was part of a resolution, so you don't really see a separate standalone policy. But essentially, what we did is staff recommends replacement of that policy to reflect best practices, current needs of the district, and alignment with the district's purchasing and procurement policy. The biggest thing we've been experiencing ever since COVID and continues today is our purchasing agent and myself as backup. It used to be you'd call a vendor and you'd order something and they deliver it and you pay them for it. Well, now everything's online. Everything's Amazon, everything's this, and you can get some better deals in doing that. But a lot of our purchases gone to that, so they go on the credit card. So in that 2007 policy, it limited it to $10,000. We're running up against that on a monthly basis. So really we're proposing changing that to $25,000, and the rest of it's cleanup essentially. So what we've provided for you in the board packet is, first of all, the original resolution that included the policy, Resolution 130-07, the new separate segregated credit card policy as proposed, and then a resolution to adopt the district credit card policy. Welcome any questions or concerns.
So, looks like you're, as far as just the amounts go, you're just asking for the finance director and the purchasing agent to have an increase.
There's 5 named individuals who have credit cards, as I think the board knows, credit cards are extremely risky, subject to fraud, misuse, and controls. So for quite a number of years, it's just those 5 individuals who have the cards. The limits are the same for the other 3, increasing Kenny's purchasing agent and myself to do that. And I'm increasing myself because I'm the backup. As soon as his gets that way, or one of the superintendents needs something, I'm the one that comes to and goes on my card. The other card holders are more specific for what they do.
It looks like you removed the general manager as well.
The general manager has been essentially, yeah, it was on there, but it goes back. I think Pete Campbell was the last one to have a card. Since then, none of them have wanted a card. And personally, I don't like them to have a card either. Not that I don't trust them, but you know, the fewer cards, the better, basically for control purposes.
Any other questions? Director Manley?
Yeah, I have a question. And I feel a little bit handicapped because I don't have the actual, we see the resolution, but I don't have the actual policy here. But I have a couple of questions. One is, it says here on page 1, you want to reflect that Director Boatright here?
Yeah, for the record, Director Boatright has.
Okay, so page 1 of the old one, okay, the old resolution, it says, the below listed cards are logged in and out to district personnel and board members as needed. Okay, so that was at a time when board members were issued credit cards for specific travel purposes. So now we have a fuzzy area with boards not having credit cards, but yet also here I see our board clerk having limited authority. And I'm thinking in terms of, we have a fuzzy area, which is called the board use of credit cards. So I would like this policy to clean that up or authorize Melissa to have more so that she can use a district credit card for aqua reservations. It's just been weird and I don't know how to clean it up.
Not to interrupt, but you don't have the board packet? I mean, the
Well,
board packet, if you continue on, has the policy. Part of the reason
Okay,
was that original one you're referring to was so outdated, so it had human resources handling this. It had, gas cards, it had all this other stuff. So we completely rewrote it. And now you essentially have 5-page policy, which, it includes who does what the authorized purchases are. And, again, the board members went away a long time. When I first got here, there were some real issues and problems with board members turning in receipts, and there was a whole lot of travel. So the way it's designed, the way from an internal control audit perspective is Melissa as board secretary, any board travel should go through her. Goes on her card, she reserves it the whole bit. Board member shows up to the particular event. Typically the hospital or the hotel will ask you for a card or deposit for incidentals, and that's it, and everything is. Now, in recent years, I don't know if it's a COVID thing or what, there's been some dispute about hotels accepting that or doing that, that they won't put it on the original card. So certainly that wasn't the intent there. But this old policy completely gone, the new policy, the 4 or 5 pages, which should be in your board packet.
It is the old one, it wasn't. The old one was not. The
The
old one.
old one's the first one, that's what you're looking at.
I'm looking at the resolution. That is correct.
The resolution 13007.
Yeah.
That's the old one from 2007.
That is the whole policy is this resolution.
No, that's the old one. Scratch it, throw it in the
Yeah,
That's
trash.
what she's asking.
Oh.
That is the policy. That is the old policy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right now,
Okay,
sorry.
thank you.
The resolution was the policy.
Yeah, that's part of the confusion, is we don't have a separate policy.
So it does make reference to the board here in the old resolution, all right? My concern is, one, I would like to raise the authority in the new one for the board secretary, it's up to 10, because if all 5 members want to go to Aqua, that might exceed her 5,000 charge. And that I think we need some kind of credit card policy so that any member or director understands, should I bring my own credit card? Am I gonna get the frequent flyer miles? I mean, that's my looking at it, but other people may not be in that position. So my question is, I would like something that clarifies in this policy a way to proceed with the directors, and what the board clerk, how she uses the credit card and her spending authority for director business.
The 2 things I'm hearing, one, what you just asked, I think is the travel policy. The board does have an adopted travel policy that talks about who pays what, how they get reimbursed and everything else. So maybe we need to revisit the travel policy to address credit cards. The second one, this policy includes Melissa to do all of that, doesn't prevent it, doesn't do it. If you all would like her limit to be 10 instead of 5, we can do it. Part of the thing is, since we had this resolution, even though our purchasing policy allows it, the bank won't up these rates unless we have a revised policy. So that's why we're doing this. So if you want her to do 10, we can certainly do 10 on that. The second thing I'm hearing here is the bigger discussion. Does this board want to have individual credit cards in the name of the directors? Personally, as your finance director, I recommend against it. I think it's a significant risk. In 2010, we had serious issues with unauthorized purchases, with receipts not being turned in, with misuse of cards. Nowadays, somebody gets your credit card number, it's done. And for the amount of travel, I don't do it. But if this board, before you basically say you want each board member to have their own credit card, that's the real decision I'm hearing from you.
Director Reagan.
Yeah, in 2012, when I first became a board member in January, we were treated like we were real board directors. And if we went to Aqua or we went to something else along that line, Casey Project would hand us a credit card so that we could take care of any expenses that came up while we were there. I never had any problem getting, the rules were really clear of what you could use it for and what you couldn't use it for. And then you had to bring back a receipt for whatever you used it for. And I never had any problem with that. And I certainly think that that's where we should go. I've been saying this now for several years. And I think it's, I don't know, I feel like we're kindergartners. They can't be trusted.
Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, and that's not the intent. And I never had a problem with you, but your co-board members, we did have issues with missing cards, missing receipts, unauthorized purchases. And it was a decision at the time of that we did away with the board members having cards. But if all of you, like I said, if all of you feel that way, I think it's a identified risk to have those. Melissa will be in charge of that. We'll have to, again, coordinate that, and maybe we're planning on doing more travel. I don't know. But it seems to have worked fine over the past 10 years. And it is a risk as long as the board understands that. And I think, again, all I can do is offer you, I'm your finance director. My job is to minimize financial risk and hear that. I do not mean anybody to feel untrusted or lack of respect. Again, I'm happy to entertain the board's direction.
Yeah, thank you. So I would like to, for this one, increase the board clerk's limit, okay? And then I'd also like to have another discussion because I think Melissa, you were here when Karina was speaking, not Casey, and I remember though it's like, okay, here's your credit card, but we had to ask for it to use it, and then we had to return it, as I recall. We just didn't have it in our wallets. It was for specific things, and then we had to return it. So we may want to revisit the board policy for that. But in any case, I like the idea of raising for the board clerk, and why, again, because if all 5 of us want to go to Aqua, that might be 1 or 2K each, she can do it. Is that be right? Is that how I'm reading this?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Director Boatright?
Couple of questions. Steve, is it possible to have a credit card issued in TUD's name that is not, okay, so that's off the table. The $5,000 limit for the board clerk, is that a single purchase or is that a monthly total?
That's credit limit.
So that's credit. Thank you.
And I have no problem doing that. I think the travel policy may need to be revisited on the board level, so whoever would do that. The big one right here is we need to up it for a purchasing agent. He's being hamstringed on a daily basis. Like I said before, if the board's direction is to issue cards for all 5 of you, there is no cost involved. Just the additional controls as far as keeping them locked up and issuance and getting it. Honestly, we have a hard time getting timesheets from board members, so I'm not really sure all 5 of you are gonna do that, Director Raymond, but I know you will, because you always have. But, and we're gonna have a new board member as well here. It is a risk, I'll put that out there, but nothing we can accommodate for. And I would propose, what I'm hearing here is at least a split board that wants to have a card. So I prefer just do it right now. We'll up hers to 10. We'll issue board members cards that will be maintained by Melissa, just like Casey used to. And we'll get it done. I don't think we need to keep bringing it back if that's the board's direction.
Hold on.
Sorry.
I agree with Director Bailey's comment about the raising the limit to 10,000. I think that should be included in. I hope that when the mention's made, that's included in it. Secondly, with all due respect to Director Raymond, I don't believe we should have individual cards. I really don't. I mean, that's coming from the private side, private business. We haven't done that for years for the same reasons you're talking about, Steve. And you let the board clerk or whoever's in charge to make those reservations. And when you go to the conference, you give them your credit card for any incidentals. And if there is charges that you need to be reimbursed on that card, you ask Steve to do it, provided it meets the policy, then you do. Otherwise, it's going to give not only more workload on his department, it's going to keep the cats corralled, so to speak, and that's just my feeling. Go ahead, Director.
Well, I disagree, as you probably would expect I would. I kind of resent also having to put the TUD charges for that trip or whatever on my personal card and then have to turn in write out a sheet for reimbursement, and then wait a couple weeks in order to get a check. I don't think that's right.
Correct me if I'm wrong, it wouldn't be the charges for the conference. It would only be charges you incurred while you're at the conference that might not.
It depends on the hotel.
Charge to your room, correct?
It depends on the hotel. You know, in the old days, it was always done that way, and even recently, when you went, it was the same thing. When Director Balin and Ringan went, it wasn't. They put it, they required it and put it on their card.
Okay.
So
that gets back to the hotel.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess we're kind of both right and we're kind of both wrong on that comment. So it just depends on what Steve says and how the hotel operates. But anyway, well, we'll see how the vote comes down. And one of us will have to live with it. So do we have Director Balin?
Yeah, and we may not all use them.
Yeah.
But I think it would, it would avoid some potentially embarrassing situations when we go to a conference and we weren't expecting to use our personal cards. So may only be one or two directors that request from Melissa a card. I mean, I probably wouldn't necessarily, but at least it's available for a director who couldn't otherwise go.
A couple points of clarification. One, Director Raymond, I think we've had this discussion before. We can reimburse you the same day. If you walk in today with a travel claim, we can reimburse you. We can even issue you ahead of time. If you're going to Aqua next week and you know what the deposit is, we can issue you a check ahead of time as far as that, so you're not out of pocket for any time whatsoever. Other thing I'll caution you, because this came up in 2010, not that any of these current board members would have this issue, but your credit card records are public information. Okay, so if you were to go to a hotel and you said, hey, I'm gonna have a martini with my room service or whatever, and you inadvertently put it on your TUD card, that could be front page news in the Democrat. If you all are okay with that, explain, hey, I paid for it, it's no big deal, not that anybody do that here. But again, that's some of the things we typically, if someone inadvertently uses a TUD card, that's technically fraud. And that's one of the risks that you have in there. But we certainly can accommodate reimbursement on the same day or beforehand. We can accommodate some of these other ones. But again, if the board's directive is that you all want to have individual cards, we'll issue them in your particular name. They'll be maintained by Melissa. You'll see her issue them, and you'll need to bring back the receipts within a day of when you return. That's basically how it's been written in the past.
And the card would be issued upon request of the director. Like if they wouldn't be automatically, there's 5 cards in your safe. It would be upon, I would think, upon request of an individual director.
We'd have 5 cards in the safe. You would go to Melissa and say, I'm going to Aqua next week. She'd provide you the card, and then you return the card with the receipt when you return.
What I was saying is the request for a card.
I think if one board member has it, they all need to have it.
Okay, all right. Well, then they just may,
All or none.
they may live in the safe.
All right, any other comments?
Director Reagan, does any of the other resources, the same day reimbursement or even prior fronting change that need?
No, because you have to fill out a expense form and attach the receipts to it. So same day is not the same as. I mean, it's gonna be whatever amount of time it takes the director to put that together. Then you've got to get it down here, which either means you mail it or you drive down there and hand it to them. And it's just a hassle. I don't know what that, I wasn't on the board in 2010 to 2011. And I don't know who would have been the troublemakers at that time. I know Pete Campa was pretty loose with his credit card. And when those credit cards got yanked, it was when the gruesome 4 took over.
It was before that.
Well, I don't remember that.
Let me just
Yeah, we don't.
forget about all that
Yeah.
stuff. Just,
Yeah,
I'm waiting for a motion.
Yeah.
Make a motion.
Anybody like to make a motion?
All this other stuff.
Okay, yeah, I'll move to approve this policy, hang on, with the change, with the following change, that the executive secretary, board clerk limit of 5,000 be raised to 10,000.
Is there a second?
Good clarification on the motion, Director Bailiff?
Okay, well, let me get to it. Okay, I recommend that the board by motion consider approving the attached resolution adopting the district credit card policy with the addition that the board clerk's limit be raised from 5,000 to 10,000. They clean up the language, but that's the point.
Are you gonna include the board cards?
Or should I, okay, oh, thank you. And with the addition that the board directors be issued credit cards.
I'll second that.
Any more discussion?
How, I do have a question, I'm just struggling on how to word it. With this responsibility, is there any more clarification to be added to this? If this motion is approved?
I think the travel policy needs to be revised if we issue credit cards to the board members. This credit card policy will work fine. On that, we do have, anybody who's issued a card does have to sign off on acknowledgement, so each board members, we need to sign that as well. But the policy, everything here is mine. But the travel policy, board travel policy will be revised.
And that policy requires the day after returning from travel to turn in both the credit card and the receipts back
And that's in the existing policy now.
That would actually be most likely the next business day, correct?
Yes. And you can always email, you don't have to drive down, you don't have to mail it to the manager.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any other comment?
I'll second.
We have a second, Director Reagan.
Oh, okay.
So we have a motion, it's been moved and seconded with the two items that you've added, which was the raising of the board clerk's limit amount, and also issuance of credit cards to board directors. Okay. Melissa, you want to?
We're all present, so
We're all here, so you can just call for the vote.
Oh, okay, call for the vote.
All those in favor?
I'm used to Melissa doing that, so I apologize. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I vote no. It passes 3-1.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Staff reports.
Okay, go ahead. Right back here. I'm not gonna give my traditional general manager staff report, but I just feel obligated. Eric Halls is out on a medical deal, but I know you know, especially Eric Boatwright knows he's not too far removed from the story events like we're having here. This is, I think, unprecedented. I've been around for 30-some years. I think this is unprecedented. The amount and the intensity and the frequency of these storms. You've heard me over the years just letting you know that your crews, your staff on every level is working really, really hard to maintain the services. The water, the ditch crews, they're patrolling those ditches on a regular basis in extreme weather conditions, trying to pull out of the ditch what isn't supposed to be in the ditch, and they're working hard doing those things. The water treatment guys, it's a little more tricky, right? All this great water, so basically the canal is turned off. We're not pulling very much water out of lines. Like all of the water that's in those ditches going to those 10 treatment plants is rainwater. That chemistry is just slightly different than the water that's in lines. And so the treatment plants, they really, really, really struggle. So at minimum, we're changing chemical doses on a regular basis. We're chasing that up and down, having to backwash more frequently than before. So consequently, there's lots and lots of overtime associated with that. The distribution team, they've been transitioning into taking over more of the responsibility of hydrodynamic stations and tank checks. And they're doing a great job, but they're out there, shuttling generators to here and there to different hydrodynamic stations and refueling. The construction and maintenance crews, we'd like to be working on CIP projects, and weather permitting we would be, but they're necessarily having to help give a hand to every other department, with the exception of the water treatment guys. So they're out there helping all over the place. The sewer collection people, they're struggling, as you know. All this water, as much work as we've done on our collection system, it's still, with this sort of severity, we're still seeing some severe impacts to our collection system. And, you know, I just have to say that, you know, our partner up in Trainer CSD, you know, their entire collection system flows into our wastewater treatment plant. I'm not sure why we signed on the dotted line back in the 70s, but we did. So, but their collection system is in dire straits, and they know that. They're doing what they can. I'm at the conclusion of this meeting, I'm gonna roll up my sleeves and go up there and meet with them, because we just need to get on the ball, because their impacts are severely impacted us. We're basically a train our 24/7, just trying to keep those ponds from overflowing. And we've got the bypass and all kinds of things going on up there. Same thing down at the wastewater treatment plant, you know, without the benefit of those 3 ponds, we're really having to monitor and make sure that all the water is where it's supposed to be. And we're doing a great job, but trust me, it's just taking an enormous amount of man hours. Inside the office, we've had a couple of incidents with mainline. There's been 3 or 4 big mainline breaks, right? One of those caused us to have a boil order call, and Abby and staff did a tremendous amount of time working way late into the night, trying to make sure that, you know, we've notified the customers as best we could. So anyway, just to let you know that your staff is doing a fantastic job in face of what I think is unprecedented.
Thank you, Don. Any questions for Don? Sure.
Please thank staff. I mean, please thank the crews. I think about them, you know, during the rain and the lightning and the thunder, and that I know that they're you know, checking on the valves and walking, checking everything, and it's not fun working in the rain, sandbagging. And so I just really, just from all of us, just big vote of thanks for keeping everybody in order.
Okay, who's next?
I'll go with, okay,
Sure.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I just want to echo what Barbara said, Don said, extraordinary. I mean, these guys are exhausted. I think I heard going on day like 12 straight, working 12 days straight, just in the pouring rain. You know, that's, one day is exhausting working in the rain, let alone multiple days, and then overnight, you know, working on mainline breaks. So really proud of our staff, and just, it's really great. And in the midst of all that, we get kudos from customers about our staff. And so I wanted to share with you all one that we received just right between Christmas and New Year's about Andrew Johnson, who's in our collections department. He's a utility worker 2, which actually just passed his collection system maintenance grade 3. So we actually have just promoted him to a grade 3 in the collection system. He's a great guy. I've been told by many people he's the hardest worker they've ever known. But we had a gentleman who called in and wanted us to know that Andrew came out to check out his he called it his sewage line, and wanted to make sure that we shared that he wanted to give him recognition for a job well done. He said that he knows a lot of people call and complain, but that this guy was super. And he's a great guy for TUD, that our company needs more people like him. He's great customer service and just a real good guy that really wanted to help him out and make sure that he was satisfied with his service. So anyway, that's Andrew Johnson in collections, and we get many of these, and I know I don't share them all with you, but we do get many of them, and I just wanted to recognize Andrew for his great work. So, and we've shared this with him and his superintendent, Rich Pitcher, who does a great job. They provides really good leadership to that group. So that's the end of my report.
Good.
Thank you.
It's always nice to hear the good notes too, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Who's next? Eric?
Nothing to report, just looking forward to a productive 2023.
Okay. Hey, Steve, are you done?
You heard more than you want from us, but you know, I just want to congratulate customer service. You know, this is hard on them. They're kind of on the front line. All our staff is. Every employee's out there doing it. But you know, when we had the mainline breaks and that sort of thing, they were here to come in early. They're answering the calls. They're being kept informed by Abby and Emily as to what's going on. So And it's a challenge, and a couple of them are newer in that, but they're really doing a fantastic job. And I just got an email now that I guess our phones went out. So after we get done here, Corey can hopefully help them with how that happens. We do have some redundancy when we're able to switch over to another system, but you know, the customers are concerned and a lot of stuff. You know, the volume goes up for everybody, and I give all the credit out there. They do a fantastic job for the district. And thank you for listening.
Good points. Okay, directors, who wants to go first? Okay, Director Balin.
Yeah, I have one thing to report and then a comment. On 1-4, as I mentioned earlier, I attended the Tuolumne County Natural Resource Committee meeting, and I'm really glad I did because, of course, no one from TUD could be there. They're all out in the field trying to keep things running. But so I got nailed for a couple of different questions, but I think I handled it all right. And then my comment is just thank you, Don, for having brought that up about the employees and so on, what they've been doing. I was going to ask that, but you beat me to it, so good. That's it.
Director Boatright.
No reports, just a comment. Director or General Manager Perkins, I agree. The way these atmospheric rivers are coming at us is definitely unprecedented. And I definitely can appreciate the impacts that the crews must be feeling that past experience.
Thank you. Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Okay. The only thing I have is it was an earlier item number 4, and Mr. Allen, when he called, he asked about it. With Director Murphy's resignation, there'll be stuff to follow coming up soon on what the process will be for replacing her position here on the board, I would imagine, correct? And,
Myself and Melissa will be talking with Jesse and beginning the process immediately.
yeah, because I know that's going to be a topic of conversation, and I just wanted to be sure that we at least address that a little bit. So, okay, I have nothing else. So if nobody else does.